There's a place in the woods called Aspen Ridge because of all the populous trees which grow there. This is where we're from. We are the Popple People. Welcome to our channel. We're glad you stopped by. In this episode, we'll be reassembling our 1959 John Deere 440 crawler. Hopefully repairs were successful because we need this beast to do some excavating back in the woods at the site where we want to build our saw shack, which will be the final home for our Woodland Mills HM122 sawmill. The first thing that was reassembled was the clutch. The fiber and metal discs were checked using a micrometer. Be sure you have discs of appropriate thickness for your model, otherwise you'll have pressure plate issues. Then the discs were assembled, starting with a fiber disc first and alternating between fiber and metal. You'll end up with a fiber disc placed last. This particular model had 7 fibers and 6 steels. After that, the pressure plate was installed. Each of these bolts was torqued. 15 to 18 foot-pounds was the recommended spec from the manual. This steering clutch finger gauge was used to adjust the pressure plate fingers. This is a critical step and a service requirement. These 3 retainer clips needed to be removed. After that, the lock nut was loosened and then the adjustment screw was moved to the appropriate gauge height. Make your adjustments until the finger just barely touches the gauge. Once the adjustment has been made, tighten the lock nut back up. Be sure to hold the set screw in place while tightening your lock nut. Then you can put those retainer clips back on. Then the final drive was ready to reassemble. We had to tilt the whole unit on the engine crane to maneuver it into place. Be sure you don't rest the weight of the drive shaft on the throwout bearing sleeve because it could damage that new sleeve. We ended up installing new bolts and nuts instead of reusing the old ones. Next, according to the manual, the throwout bearing needed to be adjusted. This adjustment has to be made with the steering clutch lever pulled back 1.5 inches. A screwdriver was placed at the base of the lever to obtain the appropriate 1.5 inch distance. You can see that 1.5 inch measurement here. Insert a long screwdriver or pry bar through the inspection cover to push the throwout bearing carrier towards the clutch fingers until contact is made. Then tighten the retainer bolt on the throwout bearing carrier assembly. There was no torque specs for this in the manual, but we tightened it to 18 foot-pounds based on a 5/16 8 grade bolt. Next, the brakes needed to be adjusted. This bolt is the brake adjustment. The set screw should make contact with the brake lever as the pressure plate is just starting to release pressure. To check this, pull back the steering lever to check that the clutch is disengaging. The final drive should turn freely. After adjustments were complete, the inspection cover and gasket were reinstalled. When we went to install the right foot plate, we noticed this bracket was bent, so we needed to straighten that first. While we were in there, we cleaned up the threads with a tap and placed the foot plate. And as a bonus, we even found the brake lock for this beast. We hadn't noticed that before. The hydraulic control unit was reinstalled next. This part definitely took some patience. All those hoses needed to be reconnected next. If you remember from our disassembly video, our colored rubber band system really did help quite a bit with this step. It saved a ton of time trying to figure out what went where. Our recommendation for working with these hoses would be to take a lot of pictures. There were countless connections, and lines needed to be routed properly in order to fit. We decided to clean the final drive hub assembly and studs with a wired brush. Next, the sprocket was placed. This part was a bit tricky because it had to line up just right. We would recommend marking it before removal. Next came the fun part, getting that heavy track back in place. We pretty much had to work with what we had on hand for tools, and we ended up placing some blocks under the sags in the track to help with leverage and pull back on the track. We finally ended up having to remove the track adjuster spring to get that last link into place. To finish out, the track pin and snap ring were installed. Then we had to get the track adjuster spring back in. To get that in, we eventually had to hook a hand winch to the loader bucket to pull the track forward a little so the spring could be reinstalled. As always, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to email us at thepopplepeople, all one word, @gmail.com. Or plop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Stay tuned for our next video. Hopefully it'll dry out here soon so we can take this old girl out for a test drive. Thanks so much for watching. We appreciate your views. If you enjoyed this video and want to follow our journey, please consider subscribing. That way you can be a Popple People too. We'll catch you next time. Bye.